Hello everybody, I'm KC and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About, and welcome back to Look Back at The Lion King. While the first two entries in the Lion King franchise are pretty unanimously loved, this time we come to the first divisive film in the franchise, Lion King 1.5. And that mixed reception could be because this movie falls under a very unpopular subgenre in animation, the comic relief focus story. Yes, one of the proposals that will get an animation fan to roll their eyes is when someone says, hey, remember that character that's meant to be temporary relief from the main story? Well, now the whole story is going to be about them, which more often than not leads to the characters we know and love, or at the very least tolerate, into being loud and obnoxious and in every second of a story to an unbearable degree. While characters who classify as the comic relief have become much better represented and are even able to take the focus more smoothly in recent years, seeing a whole movie focused on the comedic sidekicks is usually a red flag for most. But if I'm honest, I'm surprised this didn't happen sooner, and that out of all the Disney direct-to-video sequels, there's only 2 that fit this premise. That's pretty restrained for Disney. Even though I know there are people who don't like this movie, I've never seen the sort of disdain towards Lion King 1.5 that these movies usually get. I assume this is because Timon and Pumbaa already proved they can take the spotlight and make it tolerable, thanks to their TV show that ran on the Disney Afternoon. Not the best show ever, but wild and fun, and most importantly, entertaining. So if Timon and Pumbaa can take center stage for a TV show, how do they manage with a movie? Well, the basic premise is an origin story of sorts, about how Timon and Pumbaa met and their journeys together while the events of the first movie were going on. So on top of being a comic relief focused movie, this one also falls into the midquel category. I will applaud this movie right off the bat for having a premise people might actually be curious about. It's already leagues ahead of most of its kin just for doing that. With that said, no matter how much this movie wants to market itself as Timon and Pumbaa's movie, this is Timon's story. The story begins properly in the meerkat colony Timon came from. The only new characters this time around are members of his family, and he doesn't even meet Pumbaa until 20 minutes in. That little segment during the Hakuna Matata number in the first movie, apparently that's all you need to know about Pumbaa's past. During this part of the movie, we see that Timon was an outcast, no surprise there, because he wanted a more free and open life out in the sun, without having to dig holes 24/7 and worry about guest star predators. It's a simple origin story to be sure, but it fits perfectly. From what we know about Timon, he's a self-certain loudmouth who lounges around without worrying. And it's kind of cool to see that he was always like that, and seeing it be tough for him to conform to a lifestyle that he just doesn't fit into. Seeing him be a bit more insecure. Whenever he tries to express himself around the colony, it leads to trouble, and he always looks a bit ashamed when things go wrong. It's kind of weird to see Timon that way, but it works. Yet as I watched this movie for the first time all the way back in 2004, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the sense of deja vu. That's when I realized, I've seen this before. Again, remember that section of Hakuna Matata in the original movie where they showed why Pumbaa is an outcast? Well, originally there was a verse about Timon's life in the meerkat colony that he left behind. They even reference it in Lion King 1.5.
When I was a young meerkat.
When he was a young meerkat!
It's a cool callback if you ask me, and I'd say making a whole movie about Timon's story makes up for cutting his solo a decade prior. But that's actually not what I was thinking of. While I didn't get into The Lion King until I was 10, I do recall watching Timon and Pumbaa's show when I was a little kid because it was on. And I couldn't help thinking that something about this movie reminded me of that show, but I never pursued this curiosity, mostly because episodes of old Disney cartoons are really hard to find. Thankfully, Disney Plus is a thing now. The episode Once Upon a Timon reveals Timon's supposed origin story on why he's an outcast. According to that episode, it's because he neglected his duties chasing after the leader's daughter and was banished, leading to him running into Pumbaa and rescuing him from the hyenas, them becoming buddies, etc., etc. There's even a song about the reaction to Pumbaa's more fragrant nature. While both of these stories are questionable in their canonicity, I do admit that I prefer the movie version. I just like the idea of Timon deciding for himself that there's nothing left for him at home. Though Once Upon a Timon does have the touch of Timon choosing Pumbaa's genuine friendship over going back to the colony. And I do find it kind of amusing that both ways of Timon leaving home involve neglecting guard duty. I also felt this was worth mentioning because I swear this guy is supposed to be Timon's old friend Fred from the TV show. There's no confirmation of that, but I like to consider it a nice little Easter egg. And there's not much to say about the new characters. There's Timon's mother, played delightfully by Julie Kavner, who, while somewhat overbearing, is really supportive and a pretty endearing character. And Timon's uncle Max, played by Jerry Stiller, who, fun fact, has worked alongside Nathan Lane before in Disney's Teacher's Pet, which is also now on Disney Plus, and I am so insanely happy about that. You know, this video is starting to sound like a commercial for Disney Plus. Guess that's what happens when I write the script on launch week. Max is a fine, frantic character who shows off more of Jerry Stiller's hilarious voice work. What I find odd is that originally, Timon was going to have a dad, who ended up being cut because they thought they had too many characters. So, to cut down on characters, they added a character who served the exact same purpose. Well, I guess it's just the curse of Disney protagonists never being allowed to have more than one parent. Anyway, when Timon sets out on his journey, the way he ends up meeting Pumbaa is surprisingly straightforward. They just bump into each other. And Timon decides to have him go with him to search for a new home since Pumbaa has a, special power that wards off other animals. Yeah, I feel like I should at least mention Pumbaa's power because it's sort of historic in Disneyana. While I'm not sure if this is totally accurate, most claim that Pumbaa is the first Disney character to, well, fart. I get why this is a turnoff to the character, since it leads to fart jokes, and given its rise in usage in the last 20 years, jokes like that tend to get a groan, and I will admit that in a general sense, I don't love them either. However, like most comedy, I feel like stuff like this should be judged on a case-by-case basis. And in Pumbaa's case, more often than not, I feel like they don't go too far with it to the point that it's gross or lowbrow. Usually it's just acknowledging that it's a problem he has without actually committing the act itself. Yes, there are times in Pumbaa's many appearances where they do pull the trigger, so to speak, and yeah, it's kinda gross and I can't say it makes me laugh. But I do find it amusing when they find ways to reference it without actually having to use it. I find that more clever than just having him fart whenever a dull moment comes up. And I kinda like how in this movie, it's revealed that when Timon finds out why Pumbaa is an outcast, he doesn't mind. He accepts Pumbaa as something more than the one thing that everyone else seems to identify with him. And as the movie goes on, realizes that he's a fun, caring, and loyal guy, if a bit slow. It's nice how their eventual friendship is based on mutual acceptance and a sort of symbiotic companionship. Wow, that got pretty elegant after 4 paragraphs of talking about fart jokes, huh? Let's talk a bit more about Timon and Pumbaa's first journey together as they try to find a new home, where we come to the biggest draw for this movie as far as the marketing was concerned, and the most dividing factor about it. People find Timon and Pumbaa's inclusions in major events in the original movie either amusing and all in good fun, or disrespectful and insulting. And I get both points of view because for me, it's a mixed bag. I kinda hate the idea that the bowing during the Circle of Life was because a bunch of animals passed out from Pumbaa's gas, but using Timon's annoyance as a way to explain why the animal pyramid fell during the I Just Can't Wait to Be King number is hysterical, and you can accept that as non-canon when you pry it from my cold dead hands. I'm not crazy about the most dramatic scene in the first movie being used for a wacky chase scene, but I find the boys' encounter with the Be Prepared march pretty funny. It's a hit or miss gimmick that's really going to be left up to personal preference. Some people love it, some people hate it. Me, I sit sort of in the middle, though I personally think there are more hits than misses. I also love the inclusion of this MST3K style framing device as Timon and Pumbaa watch the movie in real time.
We're going way back to before the beginning.
Space is warped and time is bendable.
Even at times where I don't like the jokes or situations, I never thought they were trying to be actively disrespectful towards the original movie. You can tell from how close and styled the animation is. Like, whoa! The color scheme and environments are just as vibrant as the original movie, and the animation is pretty smooth and pleasant to watch. I'd have to assume that the reason Lion King 1.5 looks like this, but Simba's Pride doesn't, is because this one came out in 2004, and with stuff like digital coloring becoming the norm, it was probably way easy to replicate the style of the original movie with a smaller budget. Still, credit where credit is due, it looks great. It really does feel like being dropped back into the first movie and does an excellent job at recreating iconic moments and locations. And given the premise of Lion King 1.5, keeping up the animation quality helps the authenticity of these revisits. If they want to roll with this idea of Timon and Pumbaa having been present at every major scene in the original story, they kind of have to make them more ignorant to the situations around them than you might expect to keep their lack of knowledge about Simba in line with their first appearance. Speaking of which,
Rescuing Simba was a cinch. Then came the really scary part. Parenthood.
this is about the halfway point of the movie when we reach the point where we met Timon and Pumbaa in the first place. And again, this movie shows us that time from an angle we haven't seen before, and I was kind of into it. It's really cool to see some day-to-day antics from Simba's life with Timon and Pumbaa. Seeing that Hakuna Matata side of Simba, and seeing the three of them be friends, rivals, and even family. Like I said in the Lion King 2 video, I really like seeing these two be underqualified guardians to hyperactive cubs. It's a lot of fun to get this glimpse into their lives together as Simba grew up. Even getting a look at teenage Simba, which I gotta admit, I got a kick out of. It's actually really sweet. And I gotta give props to Matt Weinberg for being a great sound alike for young Simba. If you didn't know these movies came out 10 years apart, you wouldn't notice a difference. Now, this might seem abrupt, but there is one other thing that changes in the movie from this point on that I feel is worth mentioning. The music. Lion King 1.5 has a surprising lack of original songs, only 2, both of which were back in Timon's colony. Digatuna is one of those songs that once anyone who saw this movie as a kid hears it, it's their assigned earworm for a month. Doesn't mean it's not fun and catchy though. Digatuna, Digatuna, wings before the hyena come dig. If I must suffer, so do you. And Timon's solo song about his dream home, That's All I Need, which is fine. Nothing to write home about, but still upbeat, and I will take any excuse for Nathan Lane to get a song all his own. But then that kind of stops. We get a couple of returning songs from The Lion King, like Hakuna Matata, of course, though what's weird about that is these songs are definitely all new recordings. Why they didn't just use the old tracks, I have no idea. And then once Simba gets into the picture, the rest of the music is licensed songs over montages. I mean, I know this is supposed to be a bit more of an off-the-wall adventure, but hearing a theme from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is weird in a Lion King movie, right? I don't know, I just would have liked maybe 1 or 2 more original songs in the second half to replace the licensed stuff and make the choice in music more consistent. For crying out loud, with us getting to see more of Simba's life with these two, this could have been the perfect time to bring back the deleted song Warthog Rhapsody. It's a fun song that wound up being replaced by Hakuna Matata, which was definitely for the best in that case, but this could have been the perfect time to bring it back. And yes, I know That's All I Need borrows a lot of musical cues from Warthog Rhapsody, but you know, that would work even better. It would be a great mirror to Timon singing about his fantasies and then modifying the song to what his perfect life wound up being. Or hey, how about that version of Can You Feel the Love Tonight sung by the two of them that Elton John hated? Now this is their movie, that could have been amusing. But I guess the theme from Peter Gunn works just as well. I just think that with the Lion King franchise having such an amazing soundtrack and great Broadway caliber performers voicing the characters, that maybe a bit more time could have been spent on the music choices. But back to the story, because we've hit the point where Simba went back to the Pride Lands to take back his place as king. But it turns out that Timon and Pumbaa weren't right on his tail, or at least Timon wasn't. Remember, this is really his movie. Despite Pumbaa's insistence that they should help their friend, Timon wants to stay in his perfect home. So everyone rushes off to help Simba and leaves Timon behind.
I'm so dismayed. Did I mention I'm betrayed?
I really like this bit of characterization. It's not really explored or explicitly said in the first movie, but it's clear Timon wanted to keep the three of them together and was a little intimidated when something threatens that, like a girl or an outside obligation. So instead, he insists he doesn't need his friends because he's got everything he originally wanted, so he doesn't have to worry. Timon's refusal to give up his paradise might even tie back to what Timon and Pumbaa represented for Simba in the original movie. bear with me. When we get hurt, or when things happen that make us feel guilty or even depressed, it's easy to retreat into something a bit less complicated. And if that's what you need to recharge, that's not a bad thing. It's no different from watching a movie you really like to take your mind off of something, or listening to a song you love to help calm down. The catch, however, is that you can't retreat into those uncomplicated things in the hopes that the problems you had will just go away if you wait long enough. As Simba learned, that's not how the world works. And Timon's insistence on keeping his paradise causes him to lose what made it a home once it wasn't convenient for him, because his friends decided to take action, to take on responsibility and lend support. In a way, this shows us not only how Timon and Pumbaa supported Simba, but how Simba showed them to strive for something more. Hakuna Matata, or at least how the Lion King approaches it, is a double-sided coin. You can either not worry about anything to the point that you don't care about anything, or you can not worry about something because you know that with the right attitude, you'll make it through those difficult times. And depending on how canon you want to treat this movie, that's a pretty cool way to come full circle. Especially considering that Rafiki pops in before he heads back home to help Timon reach his realization. Well, helps.
Did you find Hakuna Matata?
Well, yes, I did. Thank you very much.
Oh, also, Rafiki led Timon down this path at the beginning of his journey because of freaking course he did. The wacky Jedi Master Monkey even taught him Hakuna Matata.
My work here is done.
And despite how long Timon presumably waited to join them, they all still arrive around the same time Simba does, which is weird, but if you try to figure out the timeline when adding this movie to the mix, your head will spin more than the TARDIS in the Time Vortex. Believe me, I've tried. Fitting Timon and Pumbaa's involvement into the climax, and including Ma and Uncle Max, is a little bit of everything the movie has been up to this point. Funny, weird, and a little exciting and emotional. Though again, I question how Timon and Pumbaa's actions we saw back in the original movie fit into what's going on here.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
On a side note, I really appreciate that they didn't try to force in a new villain and instead just brought Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed back. It keeps things simple and focused, and it was great to see them again after their absence in Simba's Pride. The finale also gives us, in my opinion, the only moment from this movie that should have been in the original.
I couldn't have done it without you guys.
It is so sweet to see them get the love and recognition they deserve. Not just from Simba, but from Timon's colony, who he invites to live in their jungle paradise. How else could we end this bizarre journey through the Pride Lands? How about with several major Disney characters dropping in on Timon and Pumbaa's screening room, forcing them to watch the whole movie over again? Well, overall, Lion King 1.5 is kind of insane, but there's still a good heart to it and quite a bit of work to make it feel authentic with mixed results. It's a weird premise to say the least, but if you're willing to accept it and join it on the ride, it can be a fun one. The animation is some of the best of the direct-to-video sequels, the songs are catchy even if they leave quite a bit to be desired, the humor is hit or miss but never feels like it lacks effort or care, and the voice acting is another knock out of the park, especially from our two leads. Part of the reason Timon and Pumbaa work as well as they do is because of Nathan Lane and Ernie Sabella's infectious chemistry. They bounce off each other marvelously during the comedic and even emotional moments in a way that shaped the characters' dynamic, even in the rare instances where they both aren't voicing them in other Disney projects. At the end of the day, how much you like this movie is really going to come down to how much you like Timon and Pumbaa. If you're not a fan of the duo or just tolerate them when they appear in other movies, you might want to just skip this one. But to those who do love this unlikely pair and are willing to go on an adventure that's fun and not taken too seriously, it's a good time. Next time, we're gonna conclude this look back at The Lion King with the return of Pride Rock that I don't think anybody really wanted, but here we are. The live-action remake, Lion King 2019. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Oh, pray for me.